Alright, today I kind of want to do something a little different. Now I am a gamer. Now if you think that's low of me, I understand the eras are shifting here, but I do in fact play video games, and I enjoy playing video games. But with that being said, I do think this year is a dog shit year for games. I do think this is one of the worst years in recent history for games. And now I'm not saying that every game this year is bad. Hold your horses there, Buster. But I am saying that this was a rough year for games. And I mean the gaming industry, not necessarily games. And now, what do I mean when I talk about this? Well, if we look at the highs of this year, we have Space Marines 2, and we have games like Helldivers 2. We have, well, I'll just go in the list of order, I guess, here. We have Space Marines 2, and Space Marines 2, if you don't know, third-person class shooter kind of, has PvE, PvP, great PvE game from everything I've seen. I'm not a Warhammer player, I'm not a Warhammer fan, I just haven't got into the series at all, but from everything I've seen, great stuff. If you're a Warhammer fan, I'm sure this is the creme de la creme for you. However, this also probably got a lot of people interested in the Warhammer franchise, but it is at the end of the day just a good third person shooter. Now I'm not knocking on it. Great game, probably a 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 game depending on who you ask, but I think it's important that we note that it is just a really good game. It's not redefining a genre. It's not perfect in terms of like it has everything flushed out. Like there's nothing new that it brings to the table in terms of a game. Now, it is a really good game. It's fun to play. It has great gore scenes. It has great combat. The PvP is at least fun from everything I've seen. Now, I've only looked at reviews and people play the game, but Warhammer fans definitely are satisfied. But gaming fans, I think, aren't as satisfied. Now, what I mean by that is mainly that it doesn't redefine the genre, It doesn't do anything that we've never seen before. Not saying that it doesn't deserve Game of the Year contender. Just saying that when we look at previous years, now I do know the golden age is like that 2012, 2016 era, a little lower than that, a little higher than that, depending on who you ask. However, for me personally, I think that's the era that was just king for so long. So many goated titles like Borderlands, Call of Duty, Halo were just so good at the time. They hit like crack when you would play them. Stuff like Overwatch, I believe, even came out around the later years of that era. But Space Marines 2 just does a solid job at being a good game. Fun to play, gory, like I said, but it doesn't redefine anything. At least with last year's Game of the Year, a Baldur's Gate, I feel like personally that redefined turn-based games. I rarely play turn-based games outside of the occasional Pokemon, which is another thing we're going to get into. But I do think Space Marines 2 was a really good game in terms of reviews and everything. But I think something like Baldur's Gate, now if you're looking at a game, of course you're going to be like, oh, well, Baldur's Gate's obviously going to beat it. It's had this much development time, blah, 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 blah. I understand that, right? And again, I'm not knocking the game. I'm just saying Baldur's Gate 3 redefined turn-based genre, and this year we don't have a game that does that, right? And I think that's kind of why this year sucked. I think last year also sucked. A lot of people big upped last year because of a Baldur's Gate, because of a Spider-Man, because of I think Street Fighter 6, because of games like those, because of Mortal Kombat. Great stuff. But Baldur's Gate, Alan Wake 2, I think were just the two kings, and everything else was just like, oh, these are great takes on the genre, but they don't do anything special or new, They're not the new kings of the genre, if that makes sense. But moving on from Space Marine 2, great game, probably Game of the Year, or at least the contender. We had, and I'm not talking PlayStation exclusives necessarily. I know there's that Astrobot. Yeah, I don't even know what it's called, I'll be honest with you. But I don't own a PlayStation. I'm not putting it here because I don't think PlayStation game will win Game of the Year. But moving on, we do have games like Silent Hill 2. Great game. Everything I've seen from it seems to be positive. But Alan Wake 2 from last year kind of just seems to be the better continuation in a franchise, if that makes sense. Alan Wake 2, if you haven't played it, obviously I have the play bias. I do think Alan Wake 2 is one of the best horror games I've ever played in my entire life. I do think it's one of the best horror games ever made. The length of the game is incredible. The quality of the game is incredible. It was my pick for Game of the Year personally, even over Baldur's Gate, even though I do understand why Baldur's Gate wins. However, I do respect that Alan Wake 2 does redefine the horror action genre. You know, that's the new standard. You know, Alan Wake 2 blew everything out of the water, not even close. And I do think if Alan Wake 2 didn't exist right now, Silent Hill 2 would be that game, but it's just not because Alan Wake 2 exists. And again, this is like development time, all this other shenanigans, but I'm just speaking this as a gamer, right? I'm a gamer. I play the games. I don't make the games. I'm not here talking about the records for game development here. I'm talking about how video games are doing in the current year. Now, with that being said, moving on to like indie games, right? We have the Hades 2. We have, I know Dragon Ball Sparking Zero might not be an indie game, but it might get nominated for a Game of the Year because this year is not that great in my opinion. Might beat out Helldivers 2 in my opinion. But everything seems to be positive. But again, it is kind of just a third 3D fighting game. Doesn't really redefine the genre. I think it's just a really solid game. I don't think I really need to talk about that much, nor do I know too much about it. You know, we have like another Crab's Treasure, great take on the Soul series, doesn't redefine it, really good game. Then we have stuff like First Descendant, great concept, but overall kind of just a different take on what Warframe does. Great idea, great game, but doesn't have enough skin in the game to really be that notable. Like, I don't think First Descendant's being nominated to Game of the Year here, you know? Dragon Dogmas 2, another big game that people talk about. However, dust has settled a little bit. I think a lot of people are saying Dragon Dogma 2 was either just too confusing, too complex, didn't really work on launch, didn't have a great launch, so games that have that don't really have a great track record in terms of reputation, unless you're obviously the No Man's Sky or the Cyberpunks of the decade, but I don't think Dragon Dogmas 2 is that. Obviously, I mentioned Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is good, solid game, but again, it doesn't redefine the genre. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people who don't play the game anymore, I am not the one who played it, but I've played stuff like Deep Rock Galactic. I do understand the genre. It is, at the end of the day, there's not much to do in the game, right? And I think that's where Space Marines 2 kind of gets outbeat by, where Helldivers 2 gets outbeat by something like Space Marines 2. Moving on, we have the remasters, like The Last of Us remaster, I think got ported to PC, something like that. That might make an appearance because we know how Game Awards loves to put remasters on there for some reason. We have Final Fantasy VII, I believe, Rebirth. Overall, all these games, great. Black Ops 6, for example, love it or hate it, might get nominated for Game of the Year. Recency bias type shit, you know what I mean? But yeah, with all those being said, I like all these games, and I think they're great for gaming. I think they are great games, and I don't think anything's bad about them, right? And in terms of their games that came out, they're liked, they're loved by the fan base, stuff like that, right? Of course, some of them have bugs, some of them have issues, some of them have launch problems, and some of them are still going through the ropes. But I think what's important is that all these games I listed off, none of them redefine the genre. Most of them are 2s, and the 2s are kind of just better 1s, if that makes a lot of sense, you know? Helldivers 2, obviously better than what Helldivers 1 was, and it also was just a solid game. Completely different type of game, but it is still a good game. Space Marines 2, same idea. Dragon Dogma 2, same idea. All of them are upgrades. A lot of 2s in this year, you know? And while these are good games, I just don't think anything's a gem, you know? Outside of my pick for Game of the Year, Palworld, baby. Yeah, that's right. I'm a survival genre player, and my pick for Game of the Year is Palworld. You know what? And I don't think it's even close. I have player bias, played the game, 100% of the game when it came out. Now I don't have it 100%, sadly. Will be working on that probably eventually sometime in the decade. But Palworld is my pick for the game of the year. I just think it did so much with so little, and it improved on something so simple. And in my personal opinion, it's kind of the only catch-em-all game that we've had in a while that kind of redefined the genre and put a new bar. You know, with Space Marines 2, it kind of just improves on like a Gears of War genre. You know, maybe it's the new standard for like most players, and I'm again great for Warhammer players, but it doesn't redefine the genre, you know? Great gore effects always happen. Palworld is a survival game where you can catch Pokemon, you know, or sorry, pals, you know, don't want to get sued here. You know, where you catch pals and you enslave them and you can grind using them and you can battle with them and you could ride them. It does so many things from other genres and just makes it good. Ark fucks Pokemon equals Palworld. That's what it is. That's my pick for Game of the Year. I understand if you disagree. I think it deserves a nomination. That's my personal opinion. However, also still getting updated, which is very respectable by the company. However, with that being said, those are all the good notable games, right? And I know there's a lot of little ones that you could mention. Like, there is a Tekken 8. There is a... whatever niche game you play, right? And I understand that, but none of them really redefine the genre here. They're all just really good games. I'm not knocking them. They're good games, alright? No hate, alright? But they just don't redefine anything. But you know what does redefine something? How dog shit some of the games were this year. I don't even need to mention the name Concord to, like, let you know how dog shit it was, right? Concord had one of the worst launches of all time, one of the weirdest betas of all time, the worst reception to player feedback, and they're still ranting about it. You know, there's rumors that it might be making a fucking return. Jesus Christ, I don't want to live in that reality. But Concord, by far one of the biggest flops of the year. Suicide Squad, arguably even worse because it's a live service that's still somehow operating. Somehow draining money from people's bank accounts. Insane that that game's even still legal to be purchased, in my opinion. So Suicide Squad, online only, mostly single player, all the different currencies, all of the worst things that you heard of came to be true. You know, it's literally worse than, what was it, Gotham Knights? Like, how did we go from Gotham Knights to something even shittier, right? It's literally setting the standard for making a worse sequel into the universe. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Suicide Squad is the same universe as Gotham Knights. Maybe it's not. Maybe I got that wrong. Don't care. Suicide Squad sucks. Everyone knows. Moving on, we even have the first quadruple A games, guys. Skull and fucking Bones. Haven't heard anyone even mention that game. And listen, if you play these games and you love the games, congrats. Nobody else does, alright? You need to accept that. You can love a game. Hey, listen, I can play Garden Warfare 2 and stand on business when people say, what's the best hero shooter? And I say Garden Warfare 2, Plants vs. Zombies. And listen, some people might look at me like I'm crazy and that I'm stupid because shit like Overwatch has existed. Shit like Team Fortress 2 exists at this moment. But that's my pick. That's the game I love over them. And I'm a ride or die Garden Warfare 2 fan. But I do have to come to reality. It's not the most popular one, nor is it everyone's pick for the best hero shooter, right? And that's kind of the same thing with Skull and Bones and Suicide Squad. You poor, poor souls that still play those games. I feel bad for you. But listen, man, there's got to be some sort of rehab therapy online you can find. It's got to be AIs that do it. Just don't look up some of the ones that, you know, don't look up therapist AIs. Because recently they've been, you know, going a little too far, we'll say. But that being said, the last one I wanted to mention as far as big fat stinkers is a Dustborn. Dustborn, woke, garbage, been in development for so long, was funded by, I think, a government, which is shocking if what I read was, you know, true. Could have been rumors, whatever. Absolutely terrible game. If you don't know the game, it's literally a game where they scream racism at police officers for saying, oh, that black kid, have you seen him around recently? Or something like that. Really cringe moments in it. You can bully people in it for some reason. Absolutely racist towards robots. We don't stand for that in today's day and age. Anyways. But yeah. That's all I wanted to say. While this year does have some good games, I think the bad games actually outweigh it this year. The bad games are so bad that they redefine how bad games can get in terms of a game being so woke like Dustborn that it's dog shit, or a game like Concord just being dog shit because the people designing it are woke. You know, you have Skull and Bones, a quadruple A game. Yeah, bro, redefining the genres, baby. But this year, I don't think we really had any PvE slash PvP good, or not good, but like redefining game. All of them were good. All of them were solid. There are games of the year that deserve it, but let me tell you this, none of them are contender for games of the decade, alright? Where if I look back at last year, I could say Baldur's Gate 3 could be contender for game of the decade, you know? Just based on how revolutionary it was for the tactical, turn-based type of games, you know? RPG settings, right? A lot of previous years, Game of the Years, all set bars. This year doesn't really set a bar. It's just good for people who like Warhammer and good for RPG players, and that's about it, you know? And it's kind of sad because I am a gaming fan. There's a few games to release out this year, but personally, I do think Palworlds should deserve Game of the Year. That'd be my vote, but I can definitely see why Space Marines is probably going to get it. Don't get me wrong, there are games that are going to deserve Game of the Year. There are games that are going to deserve awards. There are games that are really good this year, but none of them redefine the genre. That's my only problem. That's the only 2 cents I wanted to say. And, personally, I think this year was dog shit for games. I think it was really bad for games. Like, really, really bad. Next year, looking like a banger, but we'll wait and see. Delays will happen. So we'll wait and see what happens there. With that being said, I want to thank you for watching this video, making it all the way to the end, and as always, I hope you have a good day.